Welcome back, everyone, to Unclassified, episode number 8. It is January 3rd, 2025. Who ever thought we would get this far? But we have big stuff to talk about today because America is under attack, not from abroad, but from within. A startling trend that seems to be happening more and more, many such cases happening on a daily basis. And so we will get into that. We also have Ukraine news. We have Europe. This is the first time we've talked about Europe outside of a NATO context. Also, Syria news, Israel news, and, of course, friend of the pod, the South Korean president who tried to declare martial law, has barricaded himself in his presidential palace and is using a military unit who says they will fight to the end to stop a legal search warrant, or not even a search warrant, an arrest warrant from grabbing him. But we'll get to all that quite here soon. So, Preston, how are you today on this very chilly Friday?
Well, see if we can get a little more optimistic before we get super dark on all that stuff. Happy New Year to you, sir.
Do you have any New Year's resolutions?
Not really. It's kind of the time of year where I think about things I want to do differently, but I wouldn't necessarily call them resolutions. What about you? You a resolution guy?
I mean, I don't really have any. Because have resolutions is to say you're not perfect, and I don't think anyone would say that about either one of us, so I can understand why we don't have them, you know.
There you go.
No, I saw Wicked again last night. Have you seen Wicked yet?
0 times.
You're missing out. It is quite the barn burner, as they say. So
I was busy watching Notre Dame beat down Georgia, which we talked. You weren't confident that was going to happen, but that was...
No, I was rooting for Georgia. I was also rooting for the Oregon Ducks, and we saw how both of, just slaughterhouses. So going forward, any team I root for will lose. So, but
all right, we know that going in.
Let's jump right into it here. Do we want to go New Orleans terror attack?
New Orleans. Let's start in New Orleans. Yeah.
All right, Preston, take us down south to the land of New Orleans, to the French Quarter, New Year's Eve.
All right, so there's
New Year's Day.
Yeah, the New Year's Eve celebration. It feels to me in both of these cases there's still a lot of information coming out. From what I've been able to gather, the New Orleans attack seems much more clear-cut, a little bit more New Orleans event, I should say. What happened in New Orleans was designated a terrorist attack. That appears, by all metrics, to be what happened. The guy drove a truck down a crowded street. Killed as many as 15. I know that number's been changing a little bit, so maybe you can correct me there, Ben. Then it appears he may have set some remote devices, IED-type pipe bombs, ahead of time. Those didn't detonate. They were found. And then he got out, opened fire, I believe, and was killed by law enforcement officers pretty quickly.
Yep.
Big thing there is he had an ISIS flag on the back of his truck. So if you're looking for motive or ideology or rationale, there you go. That one, shouldn't be hard to crack that case. A little more complicated in the fact that it looks like a homegrown ISIS-inspired type attack. And this is where you get in some of the nuance here, where there's times where we'll see, especially in Europe and some in Russia recently, we'll see ISIS-directed attacks where it's ISIS operatives in foreign countries, and maybe they're, natural citizens of the country they're in, but they're taking active direction from Islamic State in terms of where to attack, how, and all of that, and when. Mm-hmm. That doesn't appear to be the case here. This seems to be more of inspired, as in he kind of went the extremist route, probably came across some materials online. For any number of reasons, this Army veteran, with combat deployment to Afghanistan, Texas man, decided that this was the best option. So I'm sure we'll hear more about that, but that is personally like one of the most terrifying means of terrorist attacks, because there's genuinely no way to stop that. If somebody reads something online, they become radicalized, and they decide to take matters in their own hands with a truck, like there's nothing we can do about that. That you have to walk that back to battling the ideology, and that's so hard, no matter what the ideology is.
Absolutely. I did see he planned to kill his whole family, but then he had dreams that told him to join ISIS instead. So
I don't know. And this is, I think this is going to be a theme for this portion of the show where there's a lot of information still coming out. And I think there's a lot that was reported incorrectly right out the gate. And we're still trying to kind of figure out what exactly happened. I mean, one of the earliest reports was that this truck it wasn't an American, that it was a foreigner that came in through Mexico. And now we know that it's an American citizen, born in the United States, served in the U.S. military. So I don't know yet. There was another one about multiple accomplices on the loose in New Orleans. It sounds like they've walked that back and said, no, that was a concern, but it's not actually the case. So I think it's still too early for some of the things about like a dream about killing his family and decided to go elsewhere. Maybe that ends up being true, but I'm a little cautious right now in both of these.
It's interesting that America's two largest cable networks both failed us, and the FBI, I would say, failed us as well, within like a 2 hour time limit here, where Fox reports that the truck had crossed the U.S.-Mexico border 2 days ago, and that the guy wasn't a citizen, and that's very quickly walked back, very quickly turns out to be false. But then CNN reports that FBI sources tell us that there are 4 accomplices. And as far as I know, the FBI did not say that. CNN reported it, and the FBI did not deny it. I could be mistaken on that. But then CNN still held that belief to be true even after the FBI said that he had no accomplices. So, but I mean, interesting to note is that the FBI's communication on New Year's Day was not very good. Just by the fact that I believe, did the FBI director come down, or the FBI director of communications come down to New Orleans?
I saw someone from the federal office went down. Yeah, I'm not sure who.
Yeah, kind of a sign that they are not pleased with the way they communicated with the public. But to be fair, I mean, what were they? You know, you wake someone up at 3 a.m, say, give us a statement. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're not prepared. Although maybe I'm giving them too much credit there, too much slack.
No, I'll put more of the FBI needs to have a better handle on that, no doubt, because they don't get to choose when these things happen. If it happens at 2 o'clock in the morning, they have to be ready and understand that people are looking to them to put out coherent statements. And I watched we'll spend more time on New Orleans, but the Las Vegas incident, I saw a report from their police officers yesterday, and it was great when they were saying, like, that is something we don't know yet. We're still investigating that, so we can't make a statement. Like, you just got to stay nice and broad. And I'm not a law enforcement officer. I've never been with the FBI, worked on anything like this domestically. But in the communications realm, they have to be ready for that. It's just the nature of the beast. The news channels, I unfortunately give more leeway to because I just think they're in it they're trying to get attention. And that's not good, and I think it screwed up a lot of the initial conversation. But honestly, that's kind of what I expect at this point. So it's almost my expectations are low for any of them to really get something right. But that did lead to a lot of, and we're still seeing this, like, I'll just say it, straight up conspiracies flying throughout the internet because people are looking for conspiracies. And it is very hard right now to figure out what is genuine and what is not. Because something will get 1 million views on a social platform, and it could be completely fabricated. We have no idea.
That's very true. That is very true. Did you see the video of this reporter, unguided by the FBI, going through the New Orleans shooter's house? Or terror driver? I don't know what we call him. Attacker's house. Did you see this? She was like, it had a fanny pack, sweatpants, kind of just nonchalantly walking around. Was that not the most bizarre thing you've ever seen before?
I've got a mixed reaction. I want to hear what you think on that. Yeah, that's...
So, I guess I understand the FBI is in a hurry, because now that the American public's lost its mind recently, and they're like, have conspiracies galore about everything, that they're kind of in a race against time to set a narrative that's hopefully a truthful narrative. And so, I don't know who this lady is. I don't recognize her from CNN or Fox. She doesn't even look like an MSNBC host. Is it possible she's a TikToker? I don't know. I don't know who this lady is, but she was walking around all willy-nilly. She's kind of dressed like she had just gotten out of the gym. It was thoroughly bizarre, but she seemed to be well acquainted with what was going on in the house. So there's that. So my reaction to that is, what a bizarre video. I think I understand why the video happened, but who is that and how bizarre?
So to try to overlay some of the war and conflict reporting I've done to try to understand this, because I think there are some parallels at times, something that we watched play out in real time in the war in Gaza was Israel at first was just saying everything. Like, here's what happened. And very quickly you saw a lot of people around the world saying, that's a lie. So Israel's like, cool, we're going to show you more footage. And we started, I mean, this, again, just over the last 18 months, Israel's like, cool, we're going to show you actual footage from the battlefield of these tunnels, of this weapon storage facility in a school. And immediately people said, there were some that were like, great, got it. There was still another crowd that said, that's fake. You planted it. Because the weapons are laid out nicely on the ground. Whereas in a military operation, you go through, you clear the facility, you consolidate the enemy weapons in one location. Like, that's how it would look. But there were still people saying it's fake. Right. So then they got to the point of, like, in the very near aftermath, after a clearance operation, there would still be bodies on the ground, Hamas bodies on the ground. They would move in and record some of it. And even then, people were saying staged. They wouldn't have A, B, C, and D. So I think we're seeing a little bit of that to a degree play out with our media here, where on the one hand, if they do nothing and never show the inside of the house, it's, well, how do we know you're telling the truth? But if they go in too quick, then people say it's made up. I think there's a bit of a lose-lose scenario here, but it was a big swing in the direction of more transparency, if you will, was kind of what it appeared that the look they were going for. I feel like we haven't seen that in a long time, but I also think that's kind of what people want, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, the door wasn't even back on the hinges yet. It was still kicked off the house. So it was bizarre.
And this is one. Well, I was going to say, this is one where I'm certain of it. We're going to see some not law enforcement, no law enforcement background. I'm sure there's going to be some career law enforcement officials stepping in to say that's not normal because they haven't documented the evidence or whatever the thing might be. My pushback to that would be, I think they're trying to do this in a different way of opening it up for more people to see. So I don't know that how a crime scene would have been processed 10 years ago should be viewed the exact same as what they're trying to do right now. Clearly, they're trying to get information out there in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I could see it. Yeah, this guy, he had everything in form. He had the Quran open to a certain passage. He had his Islamic books on the shelves. He had his workstations that I don't know what a bomb workstation looks like necessarily. But when I saw both workstations, I thought, oh, okay, if I was going to build a bomb, I'd probably do it there.
That's the workstation for it?
Right. Doesn't it kind of just look like it? You're like, okay. So, yeah, that was bizarre, but that was my impressions of it. So, shall we move to the West? Yeah,
because, and this will play in here as well, because it's, again, I think this is just give it time, wait for more information to come out, because that news clip was a great segment, because I'm seeing a lot of folks look at that and say it's too perfect. It's staged. It's staged. It's just too perfect. Like, this is exactly, which I would argue, like, staged for what? This is an American soldier. They got radicalized by ISIS. There are people getting radicalized all around the world every single day. It has nothing to do with, like, it's just available information online, and sometimes it connects with the right person, or maybe the wrong person is the better way to put it. But nonetheless, I am seeing that floated as like it's too perfect. So then when we go out to Las Vegas, you'll hear the exact opposite of none of it makes sense, so therefore it must be. I think it's just the state we're in as a country right now. So much skepticism on so much stuff.
I often feel like conspiracy theories are, and I'm not saying that they're all wrong, but it often feels like they're dumb people's way of trying to be smart. Does that make sense to you, or am I being too critical?
I heard a line one time where it said, "Everything is a conspiracy when you don't understand anything." And I thought that was really interesting.
Yes. That's perfect.
I think a part of it is that we're just exposed to more, so we see more, and we see more of the raw product, and it doesn't make sense. in a lot of ways. Like you might see a military engagement or something, and people will be like, well, that doesn't make sense. It's clearly staged and made up. And it's like, no, this is why the drone feed looks the way that it does. This is why, I just think that previously maybe there would have been an analyst or commentator standing between the raw product and what releases to the general public, and there's less of that. So there's more room for, I've never seen this before, I don't know anything about it, but that looks weird.
Imagine if TikTok and X were around and like during the Revolutionary War, and they're lining up in lines. It's too perfect. They're lining up in lines. They're shooting at each other, and then they just walk away. It's too perfect. It'd be crazy.
It would have either been what was the revolutions in the Middle East a couple of years back.
Egypt. Tunisia.
Yeah, it would have either been that wave of protest to organize people in the right way and get them to the battlefield and get them pushing back against the British, or it would have been the polar opposite of it's entirely fake, stay home, there's nothing to worry about.
Why do you think that social media, and we'll get to Las Vegas here in a second, but why do you think social media from that era, during the Arab Spring, seemed to be so productive in what it was trying to do? And so it seemed to encourage people out into the streets. It seemed to motivate people to take action in their communities. And now it just seems like it's a total slog. That it seems like it's making people dumber. It seems like it's making them crazier. And it seems like it's making their attention spans worse. What do you think has changed? Is it that millennials grew up on an internet that was imperfect, and now younger people, Gen Z, is growing up on an internet that is a bit more, it's not the Wild West anymore, that's for sure?
I don't know. Do you have, I mean, you asked the question, so do you have any thoughts on that? It seems like something you put some thought into.
I don't know. I think my thought is that maybe millennials, there's something that
Put it on millennials?
What'd you say?
You're laying it on millennials?
Well, so I'm not a millennial. I'm the earliest Gen Z you can get. I think you're a millennial, right?
85? I think that's millennial, right?
That might be a baby boomer.
It's not that.
Okay, hold on. So I think, no, millennials, so, you're a millennial. I'm like borderline. There's something about the internet growing up that you learned that Gen Z doesn't, because you know how to access a file, like a file system on your computer. Apparently, a lot of teachers are saying that kids who are in Gen Z don't understand how to do that. They don't really understand what makes a source good, what doesn't. We lived in the era in which Wikipedia was... Remember how they kept telling us? Maybe not. Maybe you were out by this time, but when I was growing up, they're like, don't believe everything you read on the internet. Wikipedia, is fake. You can't cite it. Now you can cite it.
Wikipedia could not be a source, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's just growing up during the birth of the internet is different than being born while the internet still exists. And I think whatever it is, millennials have not passed it down correctly to Gen Z, and maybe they will with Generation Alpha. Is that the one after Gen Z? So,
I think so.
Yeah, so maybe your kid will be wiser than these Gen Z kids, or maybe they will be just like Gen Z but somehow worse. And I'm not placing it on all Gen Z. I don't think it's a older Gen Z problem, because the oldest Gen Zers are 27, 28. The youngest Gen Zers are just leaving high school or in high school. So I think it's more of a younger Gen Z problem.
So this is where I'll push back. I don't see, and maybe this is a good thing. I'm not following a lot of like 17 to 21-year-old accounts on social platforms. That's not where I tend to get my information. Huh?
You don't have any cousins? Hold on. I have cousins I speak to. I don't follow teenagers on the internet. Okay, I just need to clarify that. I got my cousin Danny, Johnny, my little brother. They are all morons, and they don't listen to this, so it's fine. But
that's not the issue as much as the account putting it out, right? And I feel like most of those are older. They're not the young Gen Z. So I don't know. I think it's hard to pin down, but it's exacerbating the problem. I don't know. You asked me a question. I don't have any idea on this. Let's get into the Las Vegas thing.
All right. So Las Vegas, a Cybertruck bombing happened outside of Trump International Hotel. The man who did it was a Green Beret, active duty Green Beret. Special Forces soldier, for those unfamiliar with the terminology. He was based in Germany, came home for the holidays, lost touch with his family, and then killed himself via gunshot and blew up a Cybertruck outside of Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas. Prior to the explosion, he texted his ex-girlfriends, "I just rented a Cybertruck. I feel like Batman or Halo," and presumably he got no response. And then he did this. There are a lot of things going around about him. The one thing, the big news report from the Daily Beast was that he was a big Trump supporter who voted for him in November, which kind of adds a level of complexity to this. But I also think it adds to the fact that anyone who does domestic terror is typically super unwell mentally. So there's something to keep that in mind there as well. Anything you'd like to add here on?
Yeah,
Vegas
the active duty soldier, be it special forces in this case, I feel like is needs to get a lot more attention, and I think it will. I hope it will, no matter which direction this goes. And I say which direction it goes because I don't think we don't have a motive yet, and that's part of what leads to the confusion. And there's things that we're kind of layering on top here that I don't think we have the answer to quite yet. So you mentioned a truck bomb, kind of looks like that. And we're talking about it in terms of terrorism, but I guess we're still waiting. Like maybe it was just a dramatic suicide, or who knows? I feel like there's so many unanswered questions here that it's very, very hard to dial this in any direction. You did hit the nail on the head, though, with something that we have to keep in mind with both of these is assuming that they are acting on their own volition, it means that there's some crazy involved. And as soon as you incorporate crazy into a decision-making process, things are not going to make sense. And they're not going to line up like you think they should because the person is crazy. So just back of mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like there's a lot more yet to come out about this one. From what I'm seeing more and more, it sounds like the guy just broke. Not sure why a Tesla Cybertruck or why the Trump hotel or anything, but it's sad. Both of these, in New Orleans, that it's pretty clear the guy was radicalized by Islamic State, and instead of dealing with that himself and working through maybe why he felt that way, he decided to take it out by killing a bunch of innocent people. That's shitty. And his family now, there's the family of the deceased that have to deal with their loved ones no longer being here. And this guy's own family down in New Orleans is going to have to live the rest of their lives knowing that their dad went out as a terrorist. Like, just start to finish, selfish, awful behavior. The Las Vegas one, I just feel confused about. Like, I don't know exactly what was going on there.
It feels very bizarre. Extremely bizarre. I will say this, it definitely, remember when there was that mass shooting that happened in Las Vegas? No motive's been discovered there, too. I don't know what happens in Vegas, but it doesn't seem like there's ever a motive. And I think maybe just people go and they just lose their minds in the endless sun. I mean, that's not, the actual motive, but I'm just saying, there seems to be something that happens in that desert that makes people go crazy. And hopefully we get a motive, but you'd think we'd have one by now. And it doesn't seem like we do.
Only if somebody just truly snaps, though, I think that's where you don't end up with a motive, because you're looking for breadcrumbs of rationale that may not be there. So we'll see. But it's interesting. I guess we should bring up a couple things here. So first guy, Army veteran. Second, active duty soldier stationed in Germany. I saw somebody try to make a Ukraine connection, and because he wore a Ukraine shirt in an old picture of his. He was in 10th Special Forces Group. 10th Group is focused on our European allies. 10th Group has historically spent a lot of time with and in Ukraine supporting our allies there. Not that I'm aware of since the war kicked off, but they were kind of leading the training effort of Ukrainian troops for a long time. So if anybody in 10th Group has anything Ukrainian, makes sense. That's where they've spent a lot of time and probably have a lot of close friends still in Ukraine. But They both, I think, were at Fort Bragg at one point. I wouldn't read too much into that. It's a giant military base. There's only so many active duty bases in the U.S.
They didn't overlap. Yeah.
Okay, didn't overlap. Fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've if you go down that rabbit hole of who was at Fort Campbell also when I spent in the same 20 years that I spent time at Fort Campbell, it gets messy, I'm sure, really quick. So I'd write that one off. And then the rental car app, I haven't used that. Turo, I think. That was another thing, was they both used the same rental car app. But correct me if I'm wrong, but is that about the same as saying both of them used an Uber to get to the airport?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Like there's not a
It
lot
is
of
the
options.
only app outside of like maybe Hertz where you can rent cars. So
And Hertz sucks, so it makes sense that people are using the other thing. Yeah.
I think you use Toro if you want a car that's not like one of the base level cars the airport has. So the guy in New Orleans was an electric F-150,
Yeah.
right? And this one was in a Cybertruck, also electric. I think your only way to gain access to that would be through an exotic rental car place or through Toro. So that's why that was used, I assume.
All right. Well, I think the story with both of these is it's still pretty early. I feel more confident with the Islamic State associated attack down in New Orleans, kind of understanding what happened there. But we'll get more. I'm sure this is something we'll hit on next week. Hopefully it stops. Again, I mentioned that this has been, for a long time, my biggest concern in the United States is we're not on the verge of a direct military confrontation with, maybe eventually something will happen with China or Russia or North Korea. But these things here, you can't stop that. If a dude decides all of a sudden that he's gone a little bit crazy and he's going to drive his truck into a crowd, that doesn't happen. That doesn't have to be New Orleans on New Year's Eve. This was a significant terrorist attack. We're talking about 15 people or so killed. How many crowds of 15 people do you see on a daily basis in and around Chicago? Right? Like, it's just, yeah.
It is a miracle that somehow in the past 25 years Chicago has never been a target or had a terror attack inside of it. I don't. Boston, New York, LA had one. Chicago remains untouched. I don't know why. Maybe it's like, maybe everyone disrespects it. I don't know.
That's it. It's the respect of Chicago.
Maybe people look at it and they think, I couldn't possibly. So
They'll get shot on their way in.
yeah. All right. You know what? Next topic. Shall we go to Ukraine?
Let's go to Ukraine. Yeah. So,
Tell me what's happening.
so Biden just released more aid to Ukraine, something like $2.5 billion, which is just all of the aid to Ukraine conversation is so confusing. And this is a great example of it. It's split between two different programs. It was money that was already allocated. So what we'll see, and this is so frustrating, is you'll see people look back at all of the press releases and add those numbers up, and they'll add those then to the original amount allocated, and they'll come up with some fantastical, crazy number that is 2 to 3x what we've even allocated to Ukraine. So what this was it was a draw from that amount that was set aside. But the Pentagon said, we can't get this all there by the time Trump comes into office, which I have mixed feelings on. Like, I think it shows how, first off, it does look like Trump is probably going to continue aid to Ukraine. If we're reading between the lines, that seems like it's in the cards. But think of all of the political capital from both sides of the aisle that went into these Ukraine aid bills and how much deal making had to get done to get to that point, and how much of it Ukraine could use yesterday. And here we are, like, allocating more, but it's not going to get there. Not going to get there within the next couple of weeks. Like, I don't
What's
know.
the
It's
holdup?
frustrating. It just takes time, I guess. I didn't see the specific. These are all items. The items that are not going to make it there in time are ones from existing U.S. stock. So it's not the manufacture of new items. So I don't know. Just need to move across the country, do the right paperwork. I don't know. I think it's worth mentioning that because a lot of this conversation around Ukraine aid is that they somehow got this lump sum payment of billions of dollars. And like, not only was that not the case, and is it mostly old military equipment or new military equipment and ammunition that we're manufacturing, but it wasn't even at once. It's this slow trickle. And I want to come back to that in a second here. And that's what they're still kind of drawing from. But nonetheless, it's something Ukraine will put it to use.
Do you think this is the trickle that just keeps happening? Because Biden knew Harris lost the election on November 5th with the rest of us, and yet he has kind of slowly trickled this down. It could have been done much faster, right? The money had already been allocated. Do you think this is another one of like escalation management type things that, which I've come to find out, is not a State Department policy? It is a Biden Pentagon policy, and that the State Department is actually quite hawkish on this, with Blinken saying, no, we just need to give them everything they want. Jake Sullivan, Lloyd Austin are very much this escalation management type thing that didn't exist in the Cold War, but for some reason exists now. So, thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's an interesting article in Foreign Affairs I just read this morning because it came out today, January 3rd, titled The Real Risks of Escalation in Ukraine. And they actually hit on that. And I was going to ask your opinion on this because it kind of gets into that, where they're saying, I'll read a quote directly here. They say the irony is that Washington's salami slicing strategy, as in they escalate a little bit at a time, the salami slicing strategy has now become a victim of its own success. The absence of major escalations in Ukraine has led critics to argue that the Biden administration should have been bolder and abandoned the very gradualism that likely helped prevent escalation in the first place. So I'm not going to ask you to comment on the article because you haven't read it and I just threw it at you. But, or I don't know, maybe you have read it, but not going to blindside you on this one. I'll save that for another topic. But what they're getting at here is, Biden said no tanks. And then eventually some Abrams tanks started rolling into Ukraine. They said no F-16s. And we still have not committed F-16s, but we allowed our partners to do that. We said never strike it inside of Russian territory. And now Ukraine can strike inside of Russian territory. And the hawkish take here, or one of the hawkish takes, is if you would have just said from the get-go, all of that stuff is on the table, Ukraine very well might have won the war. They might have ended the war with those capabilities at the right time. What the article is pushing back on is saying the only reason that the U.S. can authorize strikes into Russian territory is because it's been this very gradual approach where we've slowly pushed back against Putin's red lines. I feel like that's kind of what you're getting at there in that mix between state and Biden and DOD.
Yes, 100%. That for whatever reason, we keep making them fight with a hand behind their back. I have no idea why. I know early on we were skeptical. We saw how fast the Afghan forces fell, and they thought the same would happen to Ukraine. But after 4 days, they were still standing, and they had cleared out this encirclement of Ukraine or of Kyiv, and to prevent that from happening. And yet we still make them fight with a hand behind their back. I have no idea what's going on. I'm sure in 20 years, we'll get some, not 20 years, maybe 3, an autobiography from Joe Biden. And look, I'm not hating Jimmy Carter lived to 100, but I mean, he's the exception, not the rule.
20 years, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure maybe we'll get an explanation, but it'll be too late then. I don't know why this is happening. I mean, what's your read on why they keep doing this, as you called it, salami slicing?
Yeah, so the article, from my perspective, actually makes a pretty good argument where they're saying, Putin lays out these red lines, and we have to take them seriously to a degree. You cannot, and we do. The United States does. I mean, for even the most hawkish people, recognize that there is at some point somewhere a red line that if we cross it, could trigger a larger conflict. And that's what the Biden administration, they're arguing, has been trying to avoid. And the only reason that we have been able to get to the point of F-16s and Patriots and tanks and so on is because they have been so effective, their words, not mine, at moving that red line. Every time Putin puts something in place, we push back just a little bit. Now you've got longer range missiles. Now we're providing offensive capabilities. Because you remember the silly talk at the beginning of the war, only defensive weapons, whatever the hell that means. But then it slowly shifted. And all of a sudden, we'll send a shipment over maybe in this tranche where it's 50 Bradley fighting vehicles. That would have been off the tape. It would have possibly triggered a serious Russian retaliation in February of 2022. Today, it's not even going to make the news. So the argument that the article is making is that they have pushed back successfully in little increments to where a Russian retaliation is not going to be really anything outside of maybe some sabotage that we've seen, cyber attacks to a degree, certainly more attacks in Ukraine, but that it is a successful plan because we're able to do what we can today. My big pushback would be that's great, and maybe it's impossible to prove one way or the other. I think the biggest shortfall of the last few years has been that we haven't clearly defined what victory looks like.
I think it's a brilliant plan if Ukraine had infinite manpower, but it doesn't. And I know Jake Sullivan said that the president thinks in horizons that are centuries long, not terms long. Whatever. I'm not buying that either. I think the United States should have gone full Reagan in response to the invasion very early on, which is my interpretation of Reagan is that Reagan would have said that we're not worried if you escalate, you should be worried if we escalate, is what I would interpret a Reagan-like approach being.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the approach we've been doing this whole time. Instead, Russia gives a red line, and then everyone freaks out. Are they going to nuke us now? And it's just a waste of time. I mean, sure, maybe you pushed it back. But at the end of the day, they've managed this war like we're Denmark and not the United States. So,
all right, full agreement there. That's something yes. Like, I feel like all of the conversation is nervousness about what if Russia does something that would be, what if Russia decides to go to war with the United States? And there's not nearly enough in that equation from what I can see of Russia saying, oh shit, what if the United States decides to get real? I agree. I don't know that is, I don't know exactly. It's easy in all of these things. People want to pin it right on the current administration. I don't know that that's the answer. This kind of like avoiding broader war has been something we've been doing for a long, long time. I mean, you can look throughout the Iraq War. We were constantly trying to avoid larger escalation and doing anything we could to avoid escalation with Iran, and that was under a pretty hawkish Republican. So I think that's more a American thing at this point, but I'm with you, man.
This is like, I feel like it's such a lost, like we lost so much ground on this. Like, when you go back and you watch early on February, March 2022 shows coming out of Europe, they all have like this general joking tone, and there's like, isn't this what Americans do best? They come here and they defend those who can't defend themselves, and they're saying, where are the Americans? And I remember a British TV show had this whole thing where they said, well, the French are hiding underneath their bed, the Germans are trying to negotiate, and all the passengers on the plane are wondering where the loud American is who can put the Russian in his place. And I just am struck by the fact that we are not that. And I don't know why. We can be. But I think there's the crisis of confidence in this country is not just societal. I think it's in our levels of government. And maybe Trump will reinstate that. I don't know. But something's going on in America where we just seem lost.
I don't know if this is a good analogy or not, but in a lot of sporting events, there's kind of the idea that you can either play to win or you can play to not lose. Mm-hmm. And if you play to not lose, it can work out sometimes, but you also play a very different game and you don't take risks. And if you always play to not lose, you might not ever win. I don't know if that's applicable here, but it's what comes to mind. It does Absolutely. Feel like I don't want to sit here and advocate for more war at all or more death at all. But I do have in my mind that maybe if we struck a more serious tone, a stronger tone around the world, it might prevent some of these other things from happening.
Well, I agree. I mean, the debate between war and peace has been settled. Peace is obviously preferable, but the pathway to peace is gone now, you know? So, war it will be. And how that ends, who's to say?
Well, Lavrov had a say in that, the Russian foreign minister, so we've been hearing a lot recently. This is such an interesting time just because all of the focus is on what Trump is saying and doing. So like Lavrov is responding to Trump proposals, leaked Trump proposals, I should say, because Trump hasn't said anything officially. And of course, he's not in office yet. So it can't be his State Department, his DOD, his NSA, right. Anything like that. But one of the leaked ideas for peace in Ukraine was that at some point in the future, 10, 20 years down the line, it would include NATO membership. And Lavrov just came out and said that we're not happy, of course, with the proposals made by members of the Trump team to postpone Ukraine's admission to NATO for 20 years. and to station British and American peacekeeping forces in Ukraine. He called for, what did he say? Now there's another part in here. Anyways, it was something about how like that's one of the core reasons for the war. It wouldn't do any good to just go straight to that point. So anyways, the idea seems to be that that's off the table as far as Russia's looking at it. Did you see that?
I did not see that, but Ukraine membership in 10 to 20 years is crazy. 20 years ago, we were invading Iraq. Imagine how far away that feels. I can't imagine. 20 years ago, were we? Yeah, we were in Iraq. I just can't imagine that, telling Ukraine, hey, you got to wait 20 years. Even 10 years ago. 10 years ago, Barack Obama was the president, and GTA had just come out. There hasn't been another GTA game since, Preston. All right? And,
wow, yeah. That's
yeah, well, so my point is that's a really long time to wait. And I just... What are we doing here? Why do we keep giving these radical demands? We should just put Ukraine into NATO and say, don't cross the lines of control. I know maybe it starts a broader war, but maybe the time calls for broad strokes.
So there's no simple move here, and I think something that I think there's a lot of people in the United States that maybe were not paying attention to this conflict, and now that Trump is entering office, they are, to a degree, just to see how he manages it. And I think within some of that group, there's this optimism that Trump has the answer, and he'll bring a close to this. And I think we're missing the agency that Russia and Ukraine have in this process. I don't know that we have the mechanisms ourselves to directly determine the outcome of this war. I think we can heavily influence it in one direction or the other, but the idea that the U.S. can do a thing and bring this to a close, I think is fantasy. Unfortunately, that would be nice. The only thing that maybe would get us there is if the United States entered into a full-scale war with Russia. And that's not, there's nobody arguing for that, and I'm not going to be the one to argue for that either. So it seems like the NATO question's off the table. As far, there's also negotiations here, right? If Russia says never in the next 20 years, and where do we find the middle ground there? But from Ukraine's perspective, I can understand how it'd be Ukraine or bust, or it'd be NATO or bust. They've got this much larger, more militarized country sitting on their border. Like they from their perspective, they need some sort of security guarantee to stop this war.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. Do you think Trump will be able to establish peace? I did see he reversed his talking points. I don't know if he intended it as a bit. I did think it was a little funny. He was saying back in November that the Ukraine-Russia peace will be easy and the Middle East will be hard. And now he's reversed it and says, well, peace in the Middle East is going to be easy, but Russia and Ukraine is much harder than I expected. And I don't know if he intended it as like a bit, but hilarious. And, I mean, do you think he'll be able to do peace? I'm skeptical. I'm not skeptical of him personally being able to do peace. I don't think any American leader can bring peace without involving the U.S. itself.
I think anybody who says peace in the Middle East is easy,
well,
that's quite the line. But
he's quite confident in his abilities.
I mean, he's walking into a situation that is drastically different than it was just a few months ago. No doubt. So in that sense, it will be easier, and we'll get into this in a minute, but it'll be easier for him to get to a point where there is no longer a war in Gaza and in Lebanon and maybe even portions of Syria. But I don't know that, peace in the Middle East being easy is a new one that I haven't really heard. We'll see. I'm still continuing to see both Russia and Ukraine kind of ramp up, trying to find a better negotiating position in this war. There's no indications from either side right now that they're ready to bring this thing to a close. So again, maybe I have no doubt that Trump wants to bring it to a close, and a lot of people in his inner circle want to end the war. I'm just not sure, like, the two parties actually fighting it want to get there. Yeah,
I will say it is a very tech bro position, and they've been saying this from the start. This is like, I say tech bro, like Musk, David Sachs, the group, where their whole belief is like, the solution's simple. Ukraine just needs to give up land to Russia, and then Ukraine doesn't join NATO, and then we just make Ukraine really strong. And I was like, if only it was that simple. If only it was that simple, because they have this very simplistic view of things, and I don't know if it comes from what they do, but yeah, this idea that peace can happen and it'll be quite easy. It's all very tech bro-ish.
Let me tell you about an issue in Kherson recently. So
I would
for
love to
anybody,
hear about issues in
yeah,
Kherson. Did you know they make watermelons there?
they grew. No, now I do. I feel like I've heard that before.
I will.
On watermelons.
Do they act? Now I'm questioning it because I thought you'd say yeah.
Well, you threw me off when you said they make them.
What would you say instead?
I think grow is the direction I'd go. So I wasn't sure how to respond to that.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
50% of all Ukrainian products are watermelons. No. 50% all. Hold on. 50% all the products made in Kherson are watermelons. Go on.
Okay. All right. So and I think this will help provide some context to the larger question of what does peace look like between Ukraine and Russia. So Kherson, there is not it's really split right now. So you've got the Dnipro River running. This is in the southern portion of Ukraine, right in the entrance to the Black Sea. And on the eastern side, you have Russian forces. On the western side, you have Ukrainian forces. But there's a fucking river separating the two. So it's not as though this is other portions of the front where they're like constantly thinking about attacking or having to defend against a major attack. So what we're seeing is a lot of harassing fire down there for a long time. There have been some cross-river incursions. Ukraine kicked off the Krinky landings about a year and a half ago. But for the most part, it's just attacking each other from across the river, wide river. The city of Kherson is still populated by a fair number of Ukrainian civilians. It is in Ukrainian territory. In the year 2024, more than 1,400 of them were casualties due to Russian attacks. Vast majority civilians. So this is an area that is not there is shelling of of Ukrainian and Russian positions along the shoreline, but every single day, and there's been countless documentation of this, just kind of getting lost in the fog of war. There are Russian drones flying over Kherson, dropping munitions on buses. When an artillery round impacts and starts a fire, first responders get attacked with drones. Bus stops, people waiting at bus stops. The majority of the casualties have been people that are 50 years old and older. You can't even pretend that these are military personnel. And the way that the military forces are located in Kherson is you've got some right up along the river, kind of the foremost elements, and then the majority are pushed further back because there's no real issue of they're a little bit outside of artillery range because nobody's going to push across that river. Mm-hmm. So in the city you have civilians, and the civilians are being killed and maimed every single day by Russians flying drones overhead. That's a border. So what happens when the entire, you just say, well, let's just lop off these 4 oblasts and give it to Russia. What about the Ukrainians living on the other side of the border? Is it going to be like Kherson, where all day, every day, there's just drone drops killing their civilians, depopulating an area? Like, you could call peace today. There is war still there, right? There's still these glide bombs, there's still artillery attacks, but mostly what they're dealing with are these nitpicky little drones that fly overhead and drop grenades. What confidence do they have that that's going to stop? They've lived, it's just, and what are the odds that stretches across the entire border now? So that is one of the realities in Ukraine right now that I feel like is not getting enough attention.
How do you suggest? Can they put a stop to this? I mean, obviously these UAVs cost less than the air defense interceptors do. What's the solution to these drones? Nets?
Well, so in other portions of the front, there's more of a concentration of electronic warfare, of jammers, of trying to counter the FPV or drone pilots. There's a lot more air defense. It's just down in Kherson, that's not where those elements are going, because they're being used to help defend Pokrovsk and in Kursk and in Sumy and in other areas where the fighting is more intense and the lines are shifting. That natural barrier down there has meant essentially like it's a force multiplier for the Ukrainians. So they don't have to put as many resources down there, and the Russians have been taking advantage of that, targeting civilians. So more air defense, I guess.
When you say harassing fire. What does that mean? Does that mean just a few shots to make everyone have to lay stationary?
Yeah, so let's say you're at your outpost and it's dinner time, so the guys get out and start putting together some food, and 2 artillery rounds impact 150 meters away. It doesn't hurt anybody, doesn't kill anybody, but you're like, oh shit, get back in the bunker. It's harassing. It changes up your routine. Or maybe instead of having dinner, you're loading ammunition into a truck to move it to a forward position, and a grenade falls nearby. You're not just going to dodge that grenade and get back to it. You're going to dodge that grenade, hide, and wait to see is anything else coming overhead. It's harassing you. It's making you stop what you're doing for a short period of time.
Now, the Dnieper River, how big are we talking? So I've been to the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
Most people have. It's quite big. Are we looking at, is it that wide? Because that really is quite a big.
Let me get the measurement down here. The southern portion. It's significant. This isn't something you're wading across, especially down as you get closer to Kherson. But directly across from the city, a lot of marshy areas down there too. So actually that's one of the challenges here.
I assume they've blown all the bridges.
From bank to bank, you're talking a couple miles.
No way. Really?
The shortest area here, and this is actually another issue with Kherson. So they've got these like kind of marshy islands throughout in the middle. If the water level was low enough for long enough, those could be used to house some sort of military equipment. This is one of the challenges that Ukraine faced when moving across. So one of the bridges here, let's find the Antonovsky Bridge, pretty short. This was used for some of the Ukrainian attacks into Krinky, 1 kilometer across. So straight line distance is not that far, but you end up in some of these areas where it's 1 kilometer across the water, and then another 4 kilometers until you hit a town. That's all marshland. So there were videos coming out from the Ukrainian operation where these guys couldn't walk. They were sinking, trying to move across some of those islands. So, it's messy terrain.
Yeah. That's not good. Do you think that... So you said they had crossed the river earlier. Is that still ongoing? Are they still on the other side? Can they not make any more progress?
No, the Ukrainians withdrew a little while ago. What they did was, this was during the course of the summer offensive. Ukrainian Marines, 3 or 4 brigades, I believe, 3 or 4 battalions, stormed across near Krinky and took some territory, pulled some Russian forces from elsewhere along the line, but weren't really able to keep them reinforced, was the long and short of it. So they got a bridgehead, put hundreds, even thousands of troops on shore, inflicted pretty serious damage against Russian forces. But the problem with any of these amphibious landings is it's not just getting there in the first place, it's opening that bridgehead and then allowing a significant steady flow of material to come in. And Ukraine never got there. They didn't have the assets to do it. It looks like the planning probably wasn't there. But, if you go back to D-Day, 1944, we all hear about the first wave, on Dog Green, Dog White, all the crazy fire on Normandy or on Omaha. And that was the deadliest, without a doubt. But even that wouldn't have mattered if the thousands of Allied ships weren't lined up ready to come ashore, dropping off all the fresh troops to push further inland. So that appears to be what Ukraine was missing in that attack.
Do you think they'll try again?
Not anytime soon.
Interesting. Does the river freeze? I mean, a couple being miles wide, I assume it doesn't freeze over in the winter.
I don't know. You're suggesting, could people just go across the ice on top?
Yes.
I think that'd be. I don't think that's viable. The reason for that is you can identify this. Back in the day, it could have been, but now you'd be identified so early that it wouldn't take much for you're moving across wide open terrain, at least a kilometer at times of just open ice. Lots of the vehicles, no matter how thick that gets, you're not going to be able to drive a tank across it, right? So it's going to be still relatively light equipment, if not just dismounted personnel. And it probably wouldn't take too awful much for Ukraine to start causing significant damage to that ice to where the Russians can't cross anymore. So I wouldn't expect anything serious in that regard. Maybe raids, small individuals moving across, but I don't even think we've seen that.
Makes sense to me.
You got anything else Ukraine related, or you want to shift over to? Let's stay in Europe. Actually, you've got some Germany stuff here, right?
I do have Germany stuff. No, I don't have any other Ukraine questions. For Europe, Elon Musk is causing a headache for our allies on the other side of the Atlantic. So Elon is now an open supporter of the AfD, which is Germany's far-right party. I would go as far to call them the new Nazi party. They have beliefs that are pretty extreme. One of the main ones being that Germany should not be ashamed of its Nazi past, which is a complete 180 from where, did I say Russia's past? Germany's past. Okay, all right. So
you say Nazi too many times, you end up kind of confusing.
Yeah,
1940s Germany and modern day. Yeah.
Yeah. So, they believe that complete 180 from where Germany's mindset has been, and so he's an open supporter of them. Says that they are needed to fix Germany, but the AfD is interesting because they're not just like far right. The AfD opposes friendship with the United States. They don't believe that Germany should have an alliance with the United States. They believe that the United States being in NATO, being in Germany, being allies with the continent, is damaging to Germany, and they believe that America uses Germany as a puppet, which is certainly not the case. But before Christmas, there was a terror attack at a market in Germany, and the man who had done it was a Saudi Arabian national, but he was a supporter of the AfD. And so there was this whole thing where Musk took down his tweets that showed this guy supporting Musk and the AfD, and he changed it to make it seem like he was a hater of Israel. My understanding, though, is that I believe he was a supporter of the AfD and a hater of Israel. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, given the Nazi title, right? And now he's supporting reform in the UK. He's wanting to donate $100 million to reform, which is $100 million in British politics is like, it's like going back in time and giving a gun to like a Neanderthal. Okay,
so there's not a lot of money in British politics, at least
not a
compared
lot
to
of
the US.
money. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Just none at all. None on that scale. And so Starmer's aides, so you assume it's coming from Starmer, has said that Musk is essentially declaring war on America's allies. He's declaring war on the ruling governments. He can't be supporting the AfD. He can't be supporting reform while also being in the Trump administration. And so they're saying he's totally out of line here. And Musk, in response now, has accused Starmer of being complicit in the rape of Britain, and he's calling for his resignation and prosecution. He's also calling for the release of Tony Robinson, who is in jail for contempt of court for repeating false claims about Syrian refugee. But he's also spent a lot of time in jail for a lot of things, like assault and also contempt of court. So, it's not a new thing. So that is what's happening there. They are not pleased. They're very upset. And the Musk beef comes from a dislike for the EU. It also comes from a dislike for immigration, which, as you know, the immigration debate took over the United States last week with Musk fighting MAGA, and then Trump backing up Musk on that fight over the H-1B visas. So, it's not entirely clear what Musk's overall goal here is, given that his support of the AfD would create a Germany that was hostile to him as well. So, interesting stuff happening. And
dude, I have some questions for you, but I feel like Musk has become the worst form of social media influencer, where when somebody gets popular, they decide that they need to have you see this with celebrities a lot, right? But they decide, I need to have an opinion on everything, and they start talking about everything, even the things that they don't maybe have much background. I mean, we've seen this in the war in Ukraine, where Musk, time and again, was like, well, tanks are done. Meanwhile, both Russia and Ukraine are like rapidly seeing who can develop more and produce more tanks because they're so needed on the battlefield. But it just seemed like, how does the dude have time? He's running multiple companies. He's advising an administration. He tweets more than I think anybody I've ever seen on a lot of pretty complex topics. And then he has very like hardened takes that he defends to the death. It feels like that social media influencer that like they said something that they didn't understand and now they're going to stand by it no matter what. But
Well, so
I don't know.
if we're already talking about that, I mean, I should mention, have you been following the Adrian Dittman situation?
Is that his supposed
It is his
alternate
yeah,
account or
so-
something?
Yeah, so he's been talking to himself in Twitter Spaces using a voice modulator and has been posting on 4chan under this name, but then revealed in a screenshot that he is Elon Musk because he has the Twitter admin privileges, and he can also see the post engagements that you can't see unless you're logged into that account. So Adrian Dittman is Elon Musk, the world's richest man, is spending time talking to himself and hyping himself up. It's quite bizarre.
Maybe he found out how to slow down time because it seems like he has more time in his day than most people. But
Yeah, go ahead.
okay, so you led this with a pretty hot item where you said Musk is supporting a Nazi party and said that Germany should not be ashamed of their Nazi past. Are those direct quotes? Are those interpretations of how he said things?
The AFD believes that Germany should not be ashamed of their Nazi past.
Okay.
Musk said that the AFD is the only party that can save Germany, so he's openly supporting them.
Okay.
So that is the AFD's viewpoint on Germany's past.
Gotcha.
They are not good hombres, as the president-elect would say.
Yeah, I don't. It sounds like a stupid group to back. I don't. Do they have much support in Germany?
Yes. So right now, and this is based on polls from 3 days ago, right now the AFD candidate is leading. And the party, I'm trying, because they don't have what we have, right? They don't elect a president. I think they elect a president, but the prime minister's the chancellor's the one that matters, right? And so their candidate is leading now. They have a plurality, not a majority. And people have noted that if that happens that way, that's not what's going to happen. That essentially the other parties will get together and stop them from coming to power by taking over and, essentially making a governing majority. So that's what's going on there. Are you still there?
Yes.
Okay, folks. Well, I think we lost Preston. No, you're here now.
Yep. This whole time it said we're trying to reconnect, but I could hear everything you were saying. Saw you moving.
So yeah, you froze for me, and maybe to the viewers, I don't know.
Yeah.
So that is what's happening there. They do have a chance. They're pretty big in East Germany. Anyone who knows anything about Germany knows that East Germany is far poorer than West Germany. And the reason for that is quite simple. One was ruled by the Soviets for 50 years, and the other one was allowed to pursue free market capitalism. So that is the difference there. And as we've learned anything, that when people are not having a good time economically, they tend to turn to, I won't even hesitate. They turn towards fascism, and that's what the AFD is. And so, not a good time for Germany. People,
well, I think isn't that kind of the idea that like it's not necessarily turning towards fascism? It's turning towards somebody with a strong idea to change things. And that ends up, in a lot of cases, kind of being in that fascist direction. Is that accurate, do you think?
To a certain extent, but I also think it's an appeal towards simple solutions.
Sure.
And that people are gravitating towards people who tell them that they can fix it very easily, and that the solution's simple. And that is where, you saw Democrats fail. Although, let me clarify. Trump has no comparison to the AFD, and I'm not comparing him to them. But what I mean is that when you look at when things are not good, people want simple solutions. And you saw it in this election here where Democrats were offering this very detailed policy plan, but no one cares because no one's going to listen to this explanation as to where Trump was saying, well, I'll fix it because we're just going to drill more and prices will go down. That is, they're not going to drill more. But people bought into that. It's easier to take simple solutions to do well. So that you saw that happen with AFD. You'll likely see it with reform in the UK, given that Keir Starmer is quickly becoming the most unpopular prime minister they've had in a long time, which is hard because Rishi Sunak was so disliked he moved to Los Angeles. So, and that was 3 months ago? So, I think the people of Germany, maybe East Germany, are hurting and are looking for simple solutions, and the AFD has that. But hopefully they reject them, because a Germany that is going rogue while the United States is looking inward is giving me too much deja vu for my comfort.
I think you raise a really good point saying that the simple solutions are resonating. I don't know that I would tie that to... I feel like the takeaway there is more simple solutions or simple communication of solutions and policies. Because you see that all the time, right? When you get into a topic and it gets overly complex, there ends up being a degree of just trust me. Just trust me on this. And I can see how that gets frustrating. I get frustrated with that. Where it's what do you mean? I don't understand. How's this working anymore? So a simple solution, simple communication, being able to lay something out concisely, I feel like there's a power in that. And maybe we're seeing some political groups learn that and take that right now, but I think that'd be a net positive across the board. It doesn't mean that all solutions are simple, but we need to be able to drill into it and give a simple explanation, right?
Absolutely. It's kind of like it taps into people wanting simple solutions, kind of taps into old school, what you saw of FDR and Huey Long, where people were making papier-mâché statues of FDR and parading him through New York City. They loved him. They loved Huey Long because there was this idea that at any given time that they would burst through the door of groceries and everything would be okay, that they personally cared about you, and that all the elites were making things too complicated to confuse you. They alone can fix it because they actually care about you. As you know the cases, I don't think the leaders of the AfD care personally about anyone in Germany. I think they care about a very weird white nationalism, and I think that's that. We'll see, but that is, I agree with you. Parties that are not on the far right need to get better at communicating, because right now all it is people are just saying, well, it's simple. You can do X, Y, Z, and your median voter does not. They're not listening to this podcast, and they're definitely not listening to the Ezra Klein show. They're not listening to the Ben Shapiro show. They are looking for simple solutions, and to reach them, you're going to have to make that on a broader scale on cable TV.
No, I disagree there. I think yes, on a broader scale, yes, make it simpler, but I don't know that that cable TV is the answer to anything anymore, man.
You might be right.
Maybe
they got to go.
dying.
I guess I feel like the internet's so fragmented. What's the main space in the internet anymore? Because you have 5 different versions of Twitter. I guess you have Instagram, but people don't use it because you have to be connected to Facebook. YouTube and TikTok. Is YouTube the common space? I don't know. I
think it can be all of those, yeah. But we're getting in some rabbit holes here. Let me pull it back out real quick. Syria.
Yes, pull us out. Syria.
Yeah. Syria.
Is it getting serious in Syria? What's happening? What's shakalaka?
They just welcomed more dignitaries. It looks like they're continuing to say the right thing, do the right thing. I made a video this week talking about how yes, sir. Did you raise your hand?
Oh, they are welcoming dignitaries, but did you see that they did not shake the German minister's hand, who was a woman? So
yeah, and this is where you can kind of Khamenei would have required her to be under veil even outside of Iran. Mm-hmm. If he were going to meet with her in Europe, they just wouldn't be able to do it. So I guess better than that, Taliban in there. I don't know how much they've changed abroad, but domestically you wouldn't have even been able to meet with them. So it's a step up from there. I actually made a video this week talking about that, saying just a reminder, HTS is a terrorist organization. They've changed their names a few times, they're operating differently, but their roots are Al-Qaeda in Iraq, through and through. That's chlorine gas bombings, that's beheading videos back in the early days of the war. So I hope that's not the direction it goes, but we just gotta tread carefully on that one. There is an interesting piece, though, but I'm still seeing a lot of positivity from Syrians, I should say. And that's where I'm kind of holding the line here is the people that are going to be directly affected the most are still saying things are better, things are looking up, and we have confidence. And I feel like I have to trust them in that regard. Assad censorship. This was an article that came out this week. This was great.
They're censoring him?
Well, no, they're poisoning him. Maybe in Russia. Yeah, maybe. It was all fringe media reporting that one.
I feel like we're maybe the number one source for total misinformation about Bashar
al-Assad.
I don't know what's happening with the guy, but like the minute I see anything about him, I'm just like, oh, I'll say it on the pod, even if it's a lie. We care about our friend of the pod, and I can't believe they're poisoning him.
Well,
he's welcome to come on anytime you like.
Yeah, we'll see about that one. But
not so much a friend of the pod, then. Go ahead. Go on, though.
Well, it's the time zone difference between Moscow and here gets really challenging for me to make that.
That's true.
Me to make that work. That's the issue.
I won't be waking up at 3 for him. Yeah, that is true.
Yes. So a not random, but a relatively large Russian Telegram channel that's associated with the military, like a lot of the bigger ones that have connections, and reported that Assad was not feeling well and had just had tea or something like that, kind of hinting that he might have been poisoned. That got picked up and recirculated by a bunch of what I'll say across social media. But in terms of like legitimate news outlets, the closest they're getting to it is saying a random Telegram channel said this. So I don't know. Maybe he was, but there's no confirmation of that quite yet. But the censorship thing that was interesting was an article that came out this week where they were talking about inside of Sana, so the Syrian state media, they just how much of a stranglehold Assad had on what they published, to where these guys were, because now they can interview the journalists, and they're saying like, you're not going to believe it. This is what it used to be. And they said they would come across like things that needed corrections, but they realized that if they made the corrections, they might come under more scrutiny. And they're just like, you know what, fuck it, we're just not going to let it fly. Like factual corrections. They stopped making the corrections. They were told that for news coming out of Sputnik, they had to intensify it. So Sputnik would say Ukrainian armed forces, and Sana would be like, nope, Ukrainian neo-Nazi forces. They had to out-Russia Russia within their own state media. People reporting on each other from inside of the news organization, like sitting down, too many Alawites sitting together, too many Shiites sitting together would get reported up, and they'd get like warnings to go see intelligence services. And then my favorite one was whenever these reporters were researching stories on the foreign desk, they had to clip out anything that was critical of the Assad regime and send it to an email address at the palace.
What?
Yeah.
So he was just sitting here reading all of it? That's crazy.
Somebody was. In my mind, there's like somebody in the palace that has to just sift through all that stuff. Maybe I don't know. Was it just like he just liked that pain, right? What's Assad gonna do with that? To find out, like, it's Syria under Assad. Like, what are they gonna do? Call CNN and say, I wish you would pull that piece about us gassing our own folks. Made us look bad.
He's such a pathetic dictator. When you look at, like, I know he has all these prisons that he was throwing people in. But, like, Saddam would not have been reading negative news clippings about him. Okay? That's just, like, that wasn't his MO. And I'm not saying that Saddam is not a pathetic dictator. He's pathetic in his own way. But when you think of dictators, and, like, you have all power, I would be more Saddam-like than al-Assad. I mean, he just, like, he just seems like a massive crybaby. I don't know. It just seems like a sad excuse for a dude, and not someone who's enjoying the privileges of being a dictator.
I mean, he put out in his statement that he didn't take no personal gain. He just sacrificed for the Syrian people.
Yeah, he just sat there being really sad about what CNN and BBC had to say about him.
Probably hyper depressed if all you did was... Oh, also, the foreign desk could only report on news from Russia, China, Cuba, and Venezuela and Iran.
I love Cuba's inclusion in this club because, like, they're definitely, like, not that part. They're not really part of it anymore. But they're just, like, such an old holdout. It's just like a legacy enemy. Like, oh, okay, well, you had that issue with the Americans. You can come in. I love that Cuba gets included still.
Yeah, good for them. Pretty narrow worldview. If those are the only countries you can look at to understand what's going on around the world, but
It is interesting that the people. Yeah, that is very interesting. I wonder, do you think in the future they will be viewed as like an axis together, or do you think it'll just simply be? Because I don't want to say it'd be the free world versus anything else, because a lot of the Gulf states are included in this group they weren't allowed to. But do you think this group that you laid out will one day be viewed as an axis? Maybe not in a future world war, but in a, how you had the first world and the second world in the Cold War, and the third world being anyone who is non-aligned. Do you think they will be an axis in the new Cold War? They'll probably call the.
I mean, it already is to a degree, right? I mean, it's kind of shaping up along those lines, but I wouldn't put too much in it beyond that. Yeah.
Well, so what else is happening? So they're censoring.
Clipping out all the Assad stuff. Israel just carried out a raid. And this is great. You're going to like this. So Israel declassified footage yesterday showing some of their Shaldog unit, which is part of their Israeli Air Force Special Operations Group. 120 soldiers went into Syria. They killed 30 guards, 20 in an airstrike, 4 once they were on the ground. And they went into a missile production facility, planted explosive charges, recorded a bunch of footage from inside, detonated that thing, and left. They did this in September, which means that was before HTS started their little run to topple Assad. So this was just full-on Assad regime. And Israel was like, you know what? Let's go fly 200 kilometers from Israel into Syrian territory, right between Latakia and Tartus. Those are the 2 major Russian military bases in Syria.
That's crazy. When special forces do this, how many are they going with? In, I guess, like Call of Duty games, you have 6. I assume there's more than 6 people to come on you in this mission.
Yeah, totally mission dependent. So in this one, they put 120 people on the ground.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people. And according to Israel, 0 casualties. There have been multiple helicopters. They said they had fixed-wing support overhead, probably drones overhead, providing close air support throughout. I don't know what Russia was doing. 20 kilometers away was arguably their largest base outside of Russia, and they were just like, I guess there's something happening over there? Fireworks?
Just like, can't be bothered to find out. Yeah. That's crazy. Is 20 kilometers, can you hear gunfire from that range?
Depending on the terrain, you would be able to hear gunfire. You would definitely hear the bombs going off, leading to the assault, and you would see the radar signature of the countless helicopters, UAVs, and aircraft flying overhead. That is your airspace.
Wow.
So I don't know if Russia. I mean, maybe Russia was just like, whatever, guys, leave us alone. But yeah,
that's crazy.
It's a pretty daring operation. And so the facility was built into the side of a mountain. So Israel says they'd been monitoring the facility for a long time, but they didn't say this outright. But if you're putting boots on the ground, it kind of hints at the idea that you weren't maybe able to destroy it from the air. So it was built far enough into the mountainside, but kind of raises the question of like, Iran's got some of those, right? It's their big underground missile facility. It'd be a lot harder.
Speaking of Iran, see that President Biden is looking at plans to strike Iran's nuclear facility by January 20th if they go for the bomb.
I feel like if you would have removed the date there, you could have said that for any time over the last 10 years, though.
That's true.
Right.
I actually watched a movie 3 years ago, maybe you saw it too, on people who did they did like a run to blow up a nuclear reactor. Top Gun Maverick. I don't know if you saw it. It was a country was unnamed, but it matched all the characteristics. They had an F-14 Tomcat, for Christ's sake. Have you seen this movie?
No.
Really? You're missing out. Okay, well, it's almost certainly Iran. Anyways, they did this whole thing where they blew up Iran's thing through going through a valley of F-18s. Pretty impressive stuff. I don't think Joe Biden will be using Tom Cruise for the mission, but they are apparently looking at doing it if they go for the bomb. But the thing is, as you said, we've been hearing this for years now. I feel like Iran has been on the verge of having a bomb more intensely for the past, like, every week going forward now, and it's always the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, who's always just like, yeah, they're gonna make a bomb. Now, if I were Iran, I wouldn't make the bomb yet. I would wait to see what happens with Trump. I would have everything ready, but I wouldn't make the bomb yet. I think you have to wait.
Yeah, I just the way that that's phrased to me comes across as something that anybody could have said at any point, and it's not a story. It's just the fact that they say it right now kind of makes it one. Right. Saying if Iran decides to move towards a nuclear weapon, we are looking at options to strike their nuclear. Like, I feel like that's probably been on the table for a long time. You know?
Do you think they want a nuclear weapon?
Yeah. Yes.
I am unsure. The way I look at it is, I think you look at Iraq, they did not have nuclear weapons. Iran seemed to have known that. They got invaded by the United States. Every other enemy of the United States who's been overthrown has not had nuclear weapons. If you're Iran, I think you're perhaps justified in that, especially since you saw the United States deal with Pakistan instead of, just bulldozing through Pakistan to get to Afghanistan. So, I don't know. I think they're definitely not the good guys in any story, but I don't know if they want a nuclear weapon. I think they want the threat of having one.
I mean, if you put yourself in their shoes and look around, you're kind of hitting at this. Like, Iraq did not have nukes. So much for Saddam. Libya did not have nukes. So much for Gaddafi. Assad did not have nukes. So much for Assad. Kim Jong-un has nukes. Now, it's not, what's the most important thing? Is it elevating your country on the world stage, or is it staying in power? Or I don't know. But I feel like you have to, if you're Khamenei, you've got to be looking at those and be like, what is the common denominator? Is if we have a nuclear weapon, that changes the dynamic. So I feel pretty strongly that they would be looking at that saying, this is like the way to survive.
That's true. Do you think that with Pakistan developing these missiles, that they could sell them to Iran, and that is why the United States is so concerned about Pakistan's ICBM program? Or do you think it's just the United States trying to uphold the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Pakistan is not a member to, nor is the United States? So,
I get all my Pakistan news from you, Ben, so I don't know. I don't have a strong take on that one.
Well, everyone, I'm the king of Pakistan, so
that's the thing now.
That's everyone. That's what they've been saying, and but interesting. So I guess Iran nuclear. One day maybe they'll do it. One day they won't. I guess we'll never know. But the question, I guess, remains: do you think Israel will strike? Everyone always talks about striking Iran to prevent them from making nuclear weapons. Do you think that will actually happen, or do you think Iran's just going to have them and it's going to be like, okay, well, I guess we're screwed?
Israel's on a roll right now that I don't think is fully appreciated. So they are still fighting. Just today, footage came out of a new Hamas weapons storage facility in Gaza. Like, I think it was last week, rockets were fired from Gaza at Tel Aviv, or maybe Jerusalem. Either way, rockets flew out of Gaza. So, like, that war is not over. The war up north is pretty much over. All of a sudden, they've moved into Syria, and they've kind of set up a pretty significant buffer zone against whatever HTS turns into. They just released footage showing a pretty serious raid, kind of highlighting their military capabilities going into Syria like that. And they've hit the Houthis twice in the last 2 weeks. That's a 2,000 kilometers away type target. Yeah. That's real. Mm-hmm. I think Israel is on a roll right now, and they're going to continue. And, like, what is the pushback been? They're watching their enemies fall one by one, and, like, what is the, you get a couple people upset about what they're doing. Like, realistically, if you're talking, like, how has it really impacted Israel? Not much, man. I think there's got to be a real consideration in Israel right now to go after Iran. They've freed up resources up north. They've freed up resources probably along the border with Syria. They are in the process of freeing up resources in Gaza. This is the same argument of, like, if you knock them all down, why stop? The big one is Iran.
Well, I think it's like all of Iran's proxies are gone. Or they're not gone, but they're pretty much defunct. And so if you're Iran, now's the time to build your nuke. But also, if you're Israel, also, if you're Iran, now's the time not to make your nuke either because you have no protection. So Hezbollah was supposed to be they had the largest rocket missile inventory in the world. They were supposed to be the insurance policy, and now they are no longer because they got their hands blown off via pagers. And so everyone's forgotten about that. But, not a good time to be Iran. So, to be or to not be, but with nukes, I guess, So, if do you think Israel will strike? I assume the Trump administration will enable, but also probably embolden Israel to strike Iran.
I think we're more likely now to see, just based off of how events have played out in the last few months, I think we're more likely now to see an Israeli strike against Iran than we have been probably in our lifetime. And I think rightly so, they're probably looking, just based off of how the Trump administration has talked about Israel and how they've staffed their administration, they're probably waiting until Trump comes into office to do anything like that. I'm not going to guess when it'll happen, but I feel like we're closer now than we've ever been. Feels like a very realistic outcome.
It's very true. And all those times where they've spent the past 4 years trying to assassinate Trump or plotting to do so, probably going to come back to bite them in the ass. So
the Iranians are sneaky, man. I keep starting to put together kind of videos on this and then getting distracted, but they've done a really good job, unfortunately, of hiring people outside of Iran, sometimes with Iranian roots, sometimes not, but they go after criminals, guys with kind of sketchy backgrounds, and pay them to carry out hits or conduct arson or anything like that, and it's effective. It's happened a handful of times. Just earlier this year, there's been 3 maybe cases in the U.S. where that's been disrupted before it happened, but people were being paid like $100 to $500K to kill another American, and it was on behalf of Iran. It was an IRGC agent that was facilitating it, and it's not clear if the guys getting ready to do the hit even knew it. They were just criminals with a nasty background, and Iran was like, we can use that. Pay the criminals in the U.S. to kill the people speaking out against Iran in the U.S. So they've got some sneaky tricks up their sleeve.
That's what India's doing with their assassination campaign here in the United States and Canada, where they're hiring criminals to assassinate six. You know what I'm talking about. They have like the
Sikhs.
Thank you. Where they're trying to assassinate Sikhs, and they are assassinating Sikhs to quite some success, and Canada cannot get them to stop. India continues to do so, but they've also plotted, and I believe they have killed Americans in the United States. And it's becoming kind of a thing, but the United States wants India to be on their side against China, so there has not been any action. Biden apparently told Modi to cut it out. As far as I know, it hasn't happened.
Stop that. Yeah.
Yeah, they said, hey, just cut it out. Yeah.
We strongly condemn. Yeah.
Yeah, we think you should stop doing that. All right, and so that's what's been happening there. But speaking of American allies, South Korea. Have you had a Korean corn dog before?
No. Well, the answer is no, but I'm also kind of wondering, like, what is that?
So
how is it different?
They either have a hot dog in it, or they have cheese, and then they have like stuff on the outside, like a flaming hot Cheeto, like crunched up on the outside is like the crust, or like Fruity Pebbles, Frosted Flakes, all kinds of things. I think it's good to try. I don't know how they eat them all the time, but I assume most Koreans probably had the same viewpoint as me, where they think, well, it's good as a treat, but I don't know how you could eat this all the time. So
yeah, but like we don't eat corn dogs all the time.
No, that's correct. No,
yeah,
no,
okay.
I don't. Do I?
It's like it's like only 3 or 4 times a week, right?
Yeah, only 3 or 4. No,
I am watching Squid Game right now, though. Squid Game 2. That's Korean, right?
Yeah, that is Korean. I have to start watching that. I've finished episode or season 1. Have you watched season 1?
Yeah, I'll start texting you things that'll ruin the show for you as we watch it.
I would love that. I would love
yeah. We're like 4 episodes in. I'll do that.
Yes. So, South Korea, the president, the actual president, not Preston and I, but the president of South Korea, they are trying to arrest him. They did an arrest warrant, if you remember, a few episodes ago, or if you're a new viewer, if you remember not too long ago. The South Korean president declared martial law because they were trying to impeach him, and then the martial law immediately fell apart because the National Assembly voted to end martial law. So he got suspended, and they impeached him, and then they impeached the guy after him, and I believe they're probably going to impeach this next guy, but the police in South Korea have issued an arrest warrant for him, but he has a military protector unit. His palace guard is there, and they're saying you can't arrest him, and they have guns, they've blockaded, they've barricaded the way into the compound, and so the police had to end their efforts to arrest Yoon. Yoon's lawyers and the military with him say that the warrant is illegal, but the warrant is very legal, and his supporters, Yoon's calling for them to fight to the end, but his supporters are in the streets in mass protesting, and they'll have 4 more days to try to arrest him, and then the warrant expires. But I don't know how the laws work. I assume they work the same here. They can just get another warrant. So,
wait a minute. I feel like that sounds like a game. 4-day warrant, but if you manage to evade us for 4 days, you're good.
I wonder if it the emphasis on it leads me to believe that perhaps they can't get another one. Although I believe, to a certain extent, it should be pretty easy to get another one, right? Because you're right. Otherwise, it's a game. Oh, you guys, 4 days, you escaped. So
jump in a Tesla, right? Never stop.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. So that's what's happening in South Korea. The saga never ends with this man.
You said his supporters are in the streets. What's that level of support look like? Because
it looks
the way we've kind of covered this in the past made it sound like he was a little bit crazy and maybe overplayed his hand significantly. But you're talking about supporters in the streets. Is there a significant movement? What are they saying? Is it lawfare?
So, he's part of the far right party there. They're often called the incel party. I forget the reason why. I know we talked about it in past episodes, but I would say maybe a few thousand are out there. Not too many though.
That's still pretty serious.
Yeah, pretty big, but
God, nobody wants to be called the incel party. Yeah.
The larger impeachment protests were much larger than Yoon's supporters. So, as to why they support him still, I think it's kind of you've seen in the past where leaders have led people to do things to their Congress or the National Assembly, and everyone's outraged immediately, but then you wait too long to do anything about it, and suddenly people can't vote to impeach, they can't do all kinds of things. And the support stabilizes, and they think, well, whatever, who cares? So I think kind of they've abandoned the bipartisan moment, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So Yoon is probably going to be arrested.
They got 4 days.
If he wants to use one of his jail calls to call in, we'll get a translator. But 4 days. Maybe that's Squid Game's season 3. Yoon's attempt to escape from the federal penitentiary in South Korea. But that's what's happening there. Not great, not good, I would say. Also, what do you think about this? I've seen a lot of people, a lot of intellectuals start talking about this. This is unrelated to the president of South Korea, but I guess kind of related because he was for nuclear weapons. Do you think Japan and South Korea will pursue nuclear weapons if President Trump fluctuates on the U.S.'s defense agreements? As particularly, NATO would be the tipping point a lot of them are highlighting, So, they're kind of...
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about with Iran, right? We've done a really good job, or a really poor job, however you want to look at it, at showing how nuclear weapons can be such a deterrent. So I think at some point those countries have to make that determination that they would probably lose a degree of international support. There'd be an international condemnation for expanding nuclear programs. But I can understand from anyone's point of view thinking that is what we need to ensure our safety. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen much about South Korea or Japan really pursuing that significantly, but
as far as
I understand the argument for it, man, is the thing. Yeah.
I know they're the breakout states, if that makes sense, where they don't have an interest in developing them, At least Yoon does. I don't know about the Japanese prime minister. I know that they have talked about it a lot, and there's like a different Japanese prime minister every other week at this point. But they are breakout states in the same way Iran is. But Iran has stated its intention to develop nuclear weapons, and they're also not an American ally. So, but these are states that can make them quite quickly. I believe other states on that list are Canada to a certain extent, although I doubt modern Canada has that ability still, as well as Germany, and that's about it. Maybe I've seen like talk of Brazil or Australia being on there. I doubt it. As far as I know, they don't have the bases they would need to do it as quickly as Japan and South Korea, who could do it.
I'll probably put this in the bucket of the U.S. invasion of Greenland and Panama and Canada. But
I think nuclear proliferation and non-proliferation is so fascinating because it's the crown jewel of U.S. foreign policy, right? Non-proliferation, and is one of the few policies that does benefit the United States, but is also, I shouldn't say one of the few policies. There are a lot of policies like this that benefits the United States, but also the rest of the world seems to like, and they all kind of get on board with it. But if that thing kind of gets torn apart, I don't know. We're going to be in a weird world. But I would hate to see that because it's a pretty dope treaty. So, but anyways, folks, if you are watching for the first time, second time, third time, make sure to subscribe, like, comment, follow, and we will be very appreciative. And hopefully you made it to this. If you made it to the end, let us know. What should they let us know, Preston?
New Year's resolution. If they're New Year's resolution people.
Yes. If
yes
you
or
have
no?
a New Year's resolution.
You don't have to leave the resolution. That's private. Keep that. It's like a wish. You can't put that out there in the open. Is that a thing? Just whether or not you're a resolution person, that works. But yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, if you have a resolution, let us know. If you don't have a resolution, you should tell us, no, I don't have a resolution. Anyways, cool. All right, folks, we're going to be cruising for a bruising here, and we will see you next week. So, later.